Well, Lorraine, thank you so much for being here on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. I am really glad that you're here. And before we get started, because we've got so much to cover, like I said, we've got great conversation about to happen. Why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Okay. Well, I'm so excited. This is so much fun to do a show like this. And even if it's halfway around the world, it's like we're sitting in the same room.
I know.
My name is Lorraine Ball. My company is Round Peg, and it is 18 years old. And it was started actually, and people ask me about the name Round Peg. And it's because I spent 20 years in corporate America feeling like a square peg in a round hole. And this is where I fit. And so after a fun, lengthy career, but there was a point at which, the glass ceiling was there and the bureaucracy. And I thought, I can do these things and I can do them better. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go off and I'm going to do it on my own. And I had a vision for a business, and then we're going to talk about this, and the company isn't anywhere near what I thought it was going to be. But today we're a digital agency. We manage web design projects and content marketing projects and marketing strategy for mostly small businesses, not necessarily micro enterprises, but companies under about 100 employees, graphic design, and with one eye on whatever's next and coming down the road.
Oh my gosh, and it's fantastic because we just had a conversation before we started recording this, and you basically said that you're also running your podcast, which has been running for 10 years, and that blew my mind because it's not that you hear that very often. So like I said, hats off to you for keeping that going. But I think the other thing is that intrigues me as well a little bit about how you're saying is it a square peg in a round hole or a round peg in a square hole?
Well, the company is Round Peg, and the expression is, being a square peg in a round hole and not fitting anywhere. And
yes. It's so good.
Thank you. And this company is where I fit. It's built on things that I do well, that I think add value to other people. And that's why there's no singing at Round Peg. I don't sing well.
Now, the thing is when you start a company like this, or when you made that decision to go and be an entrepreneur and start your own thing, what was the kind of motivation or the inspiration, or what gave you that little bit of a push really to do it, to take that leap of faith?
Well, it was funny. When I was in grad school, I had originally envisioned a career working with small businesses. And somewhere along the line, I had a great interview with a large corporation that led to another large corporation that led to another large corporation. And I looked around and I thought, this isn't really what I wanted to do. I mean, it's been fun. But also the company that I was working with, they were going through some really difficult times, and they were making some incredibly bad decisions. And I was sitting on the sidelines going, that isn't the right thing. And if we just do this, and I actually was supposed to lay off a number of my employees. And I went to my boss and I said to him, if you will let us, instead of laying these people off, I would like to sell the services that we provide, not only internally. I'd like to kind of create a little agency inside the company and sell our services outside the business. And they let me do it. And a number of managers started to do the same thing, but there was only one manager that actually made a profit.
Wow.
And that was me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was covering the cost of keeping my employees on board, and we were essentially returning money to the company. And we did that for a while. I learned a lot about running an agency. And then we decided that the company continued to sort of progress down this path. And I thought, this is not going to work. And I don't want to work for anybody else. And I've kind of learned some of these things, and I had some background now in running an agency. I also had a lot of background in presentations and in training. And I thought, I could go back to that and I could teach the things that I'm good at. and actually booked my first 2 speaking gigs before I left my corporate job. And it was but then it was a really long time before I booked my next ones. And I think that was one of the most invaluable lessons as an entrepreneur, is that the first sale is always easy. You always have one friend out there who's going to get in on board to help you out, to buy your services. And you think you're on a roll. And what you find out is that you had one really good friend. And it took a while to get that, that next opportunity.
I think for everybody who's going now or starting their own business, going into the entrepreneurial world, yes, the first sale is the easiest, because normally it's close friends or family that is helping you out just to get a foot in the door. And then along the line, you go like, this is not working. What am I doing wrong? And yes, I mean, I spoke to another, a female entrepreneur quite a few weeks back, and she said actually something that is so, so true. If you are going into the entrepreneurial world, you think it is about running a business, and yes, it is, but it is so much more about self-development. Your journey is about self-development every single step of the way. And I thought I just wanted to say that, because I think you as well, for being in your industry and for running your business for so long, you can possibly relate to that and say, yes, I have learned so much more on a personal level, which you can then go back and incorporate in your business.
Oh my God. A little bit of perspective. Remember at the beginning of this conversation, I said, we're a digital agency.
Yeah.
Now, number one, this is not the face of a digital agency. Okay. Facebook didn't exist when we started this business. No Twitter, no LinkedIn. And so our entire business model is built on a platform that I had no future vision of. There was no way to plan to look down the road and go, you know what? In 10 years, I'm going to have an online training portal. I'm going to have a digital. It just wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And so I was really lucky. I hired bright, interesting young professionals who were doing things and saying, Lorraine, you need to learn this. Okay, whatever. Yeah. Facebook me, it'll be fine. And they were right. And sometimes they weren't, there was that, there were some software products that we sort of pursued. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need to be Snapchatting. It's not me. And it's okay. I'm all right in not snapping. But knowing that the business horizon was changing was absolutely, and being willing to kind of make those changes as I learned new things, that was critical.
And I think that works so well with what we're going to talk about. It's how to pivot in your business. And am I right in saying in an ever-changing market? Because let's face it, technology is constantly evolving. We actually have to run to keep up with so many things these days.
Absolutely.
And I'm getting really excited about this, because I don't think I've ever spoken to a female entrepreneur who talks so much about we have to also be open-minded about adapting to pivoting in a changing market. Because we're always just looking at these strategies and all of these platforms available online in particular, and we're thinking this is the way forward. But we also need to remember about being open-minded, because things will evolve, things will change. And we need to realize when to pivot and when not to pivot. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I think the first things that you want to talk to us about is about the research that needs to be done up front. So please, I think you're so excited to get into it. I can just hear it. Please tell us all about that, because I think that is one of the most important steps.
So I'm a geek. I'm a little bit of a numbers geek. And so I will look at the numbers and I will kick the tires on things. And I think the first thing that, and this is a mistake that I made, is I knew that I was good at building teams. I had done it with my organization. I had transformed multiple organizations. And I was typically brought in when I was in corporate to a team that was dysfunctional, that was on the edge, that they were like, Lorraine, we're not sure this island of misfit toys is ever going to work, but you give it a shot. And I did that multiple times. And I thought, well, I'm good at this. I can do this. And so I launched the business. And that was sort of my vision, was I was going to take the skills that I had and offer them to other managers. Well, in 2002, the economy was not quite as bad as 2008, but it was kind of down there. And companies weren't investing in people. People were disposable. And I had built this entire business model without really looking at the market conditions. So when I started approaching organizations about what I had in mind, there was no market. There was no appetite for what I was selling. And so that's when I kind of stepped back and went, okay, what else is it that I do? And what is it that people are interested in? And that's where I got into writing business plans, because I kept running into a lot of other folks like me who had left corporate and had started these businesses. And so the research was starting to show that, well, there's a market here. Companies are downsizing. They're letting employees go, and they're letting seasoned employees go. So instead of trying to help companies motivate their seasoned employees, I'm going to help companies work. I'm not going to help companies. I'm going to help these seasoned employees at the beginning of their next ventures.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And is that where your research then came in? Because it was basically from what you've experienced. And you kind of like realized that at that time you were offering one thing, there was no market for it. But then through some research, through finding out what was really happening in the market, you then pivoted and you decided to go for this kind of audience where there was a basic need, really, because now they're out of a job, they needed to go on and find something else to do in order to, let's face it, start making money and having a living again.
Well, I was going to say, one of the, on the research side of it, one of the things that I did, and I'm sure that my state is not all that different, I can get a list of new businesses that file articles of incorporation every single month.
My goodness.
So I could, for I think it was $25 or $50 fee, I started looking at how many businesses were being formed. I looked at where they were filing. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to drive all over the state of Indiana. We're centrally located, which is great, but it's 2.5 hours to the very northern tip, and it's 2.5 to 3 hours to the southern tip. So I kind of drew a circle and said, how many businesses are being formed in what we call the donut counties? And so I knew, okay, there are so many being formed. Then what I did is I screened out and I said, okay, I'm not going to work with real estate companies because they form legally, but it's just two guys going into business, buying a property. Let's take all of those off the table. And so I had a list of new businesses being created every month, and I could track that over time and see that the northern counties, there were more businesses being formed than the southern counties. So when it came to joining a networking group, when it came to doing a direct mail, I could literally use this list. And yeah, I know many of your listeners are going, direct mail? I'm like, yeah, before email was really a thing, we designed and printed postcards. So that research of knowing not just I couldn't sell X, I could sell Y, and I could see there was an opportunity for it, but then using numbers to back it up really helped me make that pivot.
Yeah. The other thing you want to talk to us about is also about the trends. And this is something that I find very interesting. This is something that I started fairly early on when I started my business. But I also realized a lot of people don't really know how to watch the trends. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the first thing is I think you have to be willing to listen to a lot of people. And our sort of transition really started happening as the internet started coming up, because initially it was Twitter. Even before Twitter, and this was at a time when only college kids could be on Facebook, I got connected to a small group of people who had built this little online community, and they invited 16 people who then invited their friends who invited their friends. And the community grew from 16 people to 10,000.
Wow.
And it was all locally based, and it was all built around this idea of making the big state feel smaller. It was called Smaller Indiana. And hats off to a gentleman by the name of Pat Coyle, who had this vision. He didn't really know where it was going to go, but the platform introduced me to a lot of people who were living on bleeding edges, and they'd invite me to events or invite me to conversations, or there'd be somebody going, Lorraine, did you see this article? You should look at this. And so my trend watching journey really began with the help of a great network of friends. Amazing. And then, Twitter came online, and at that time, so you're talking like 2008, 2009, Twitter was fun. And we would jump between the online and the offline world in a way that we don't really do as much. But we would have a meetup. And so there'd be all these people that were sharing articles. And I'm going to go on a little tangent here, if I may. Twitter. What made Twitter really cool was if you liked an idea, you had to retweet it. You couldn't like it. There was no like button. So you had to have some skin in the game. You had to care enough about what you were reading to reshare it. And in doing so, you introduced your friends to other people who you knew, to other people who you knew. And it created this really wonderful dialogue and this really great place where people had conversations. Yeah. The introduction of the like button killed that, because it was so easy. People just like. Well, that's invisible and it doesn't spread ideas. And so I really think Twitter has suffered. And so I actually am on a mission now. When I'm on Twitter, I respond to people. I don't just like. If I like something, I retweet it. And what that does is it's really made Twitter fun for me again. But so that's side thing. But the main thing was that those conversations really helped me figure out where I needed to go. The other thing that I learned early in my trend watching is that you have to have, I think, what tech guys call a sandbox. You have to have a place that you're willing to experiment. And it doesn't have to be your core website, but Facebook. I should have a Facebook page. All right, cool. I'll build it. We'll see what happens. I've got this recording equipment. I've got this smartphone. I can record stuff. Podcast. What would that be like? And just trying these things and looking at what other people are doing to make it valuable, and just kind of being willing to go, you know what, that was a dumb idea. We are not going to do that anymore.
Oh my gosh, I love what you're saying. And I have to take this one point out that you've mentioned when you said you went on your little rant, and I don't mind it at all, because I think it's very true what you're saying. In social media in particular, these like buttons and things like that, it's, how can I say? It's not a real connection. And I find it very true when I'm on Instagram, when I'm on Facebook, and I post something and people come back to me. And if they start communicating with me, I communicate back. I don't just like their reply. I literally start communicating back, because I think that's one of the stages or one of the phases, and I might be completely wrong for saying this, but in the online world, we lack communication. We don't do that enough. And the thing about the online world is it needs to connect us more. But yet again, it kind of stops us from connecting because, number one, we're too lazy. And I think that's so important what you're saying. And I kind of see now the market changing as well. The other thing we want to talk about is hiring people with different skills than you have. And I love this topic because I've got so many great examples to share with you. But why don't you tell us a little bit about it? Because I'm sure you've got loads of experience yourself.
So I am I'm a production artist. And what that means is I know how to use the software. I'm great at editing, and I have a good eye for what needs to be done. But I will tell you what happens up here and what happens on the paper when I do it. Some gets lost in the translation. And I can spend a lot of time trying to improve those skills. And I've gotten better, but I'm not a graphic designer. And so when I started getting more requests for design work. And okay, so this is a pivot and a lesson learned, and we'll come back to this. I wrote a business plan for a company, and I hired, because they were like, wow, this is really great, we'd love a logo. I hired someone to design the logo. Well, first off, I didn't love the logo she created. And when I gave her feedback, she was like, you're not the client. The client is really this other company, and they're happy with it. So that partially bristled me a little bit, because I had a vision with this plan and I'd been working with them. But the thing that put the pin in it was when they needed copywriting for something she was designing. Instead of reminding them to come back to me, she brought in one of her friends. And that's when I said, we're done. So part of it is, when you're starting out, it's easy to have partnerships. I think the lesson there might be to have really well defined who's doing what and how is this going to work. Yeah. But then also, I sometimes I brought someone in, like the graphic designer, because I couldn't do that work myself. And sometimes I brought someone in who I hired to do X. I hired her to do administrative stuff. But she was really bright and she was really talented. And she kept coming to me saying, you know, we do this for this client, but I could do this. And being willing to say, all right, let's give it a shot. The woman, and this is so funny because she came in, it was actually an unpaid internship. She was just looking to get her foot in the door anywhere. We built an entire content marketing program that is now 10 years later, 35% of my business based on her original vision, not mine.
Oh my gosh.
She's now an editor at the at our city newspaper. I mean, she's very talented. And the cool thing is we still hang out. She was my co-host with the podcast for a while. She really had a lot of just great ideas on where the market was going. And she kept saying, you need to read this, or we need to do this, because people will pay for it.
You know, as individuals, we are unique as our DNA, really. But also we've got unique skills. We can't do everything. And actually there's a very good story that is inside Think and Grow Rich.
Okay.
Napoleon Hill. He had this amazing story there where he spoke about Mr. Ford had to go into trial, and it wasn't really a trial, but they put him on the pedestal and they said, listen, we wanted to prove really that you are not as clever as everybody thinks you are, even though you've got this multi-million-dollar business, but you're not really that clever. And they started asking me all these general knowledge questions to see if he knew what was going on in the world, etc. And then it came to the fact that he couldn't answer these general knowledge questions. And he just started getting fed up with them. And he said, listen, I'm going to be very honest with you and straight now here. Maybe I don't have the general knowledge that you want me to have, but I have a little electronic button selection on my desk, and I can press a button that will get somebody to come into my office and give you that answer. And I just loved that he said that, because it just meant that, yes, he doesn't have all the answers, but he knows people who's got those answers. And it works on the same principle about employing people or working with people that's got different skills than you have. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know, literally.
Absolutely. And, you know, when I first started, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs do this, I hired a lot of young professionals because it was inexpensive and I didn't have a huge budget. But I developed a really good eye for spotting the talent, for the people that had the potential. And fortunately, we've matured as a company. And so now we've got kind of a mix. Some of those young professionals stayed with me for quite a while. So 6-7 years. So I got used to that maturity in some of my positions. And so now I do a little bit of both. We had 2 positions open up last March, and one of them I really liked. 2 women. One had a lot of experience. One had that raw talent, and I really loved her enthusiasm. But other members of the team were like, yeah, but we have another new position. and we're going to put a young professional there, we really need someone with more seasoning to balance. And that was the direction we went in. Talia is phenomenal. And I'm so glad, that we made that choice. But two things, knowing that it is that balance, when you grow a team that's beyond 2 or 3 people, there are 9 of us now. So having a little bit of experience and some new people who just have energy, and also being willing to listen to other people in the hiring process and letting everyone have at the end of the day, I have to live with the decision, but letting everyone kind of say, you know what, Lorraine, this is a good choice and here's why. Yeah. Almost every hiring decision has been about, I'm doing this. If I gave this to someone else, what could I do and would the business grow? From my neighbor and I were out walking, and Rebecca, her daughter, do this, I'll tell you how long she's worked with me now. Her daughter was entering 2nd grade, and she's like, I don't have to be there for Zoe as much, and I'd really love to find a job. And I'm like, really? How would you like to do some admin work? And she started doing it at home because I was working out at the house at the time, and we'd run back and forth across the lawn and I would drop stuff off. And we moved into a building and she came with us. And Zoe is graduating college in the spring, and Rebecca is still with me. And and it was the right job at the right time, but it was me deciding, if I'm not sending the follow-up emails to all these people I'm meeting at networking, and I still balance my own checking account, but I don't write the checks anymore, and I don't send the invoices, and I'm not doing all of that administrative work. So I have time to sell, to write another blog post, to work on a project for a client. The business grows.
Yes.
I started working with a business coach who reminded me of a really important metric, and that is revenue per employee. And so I come out of what was a manufacturing environment, and in a manufacturing environment, you have this kind of window. If your sales are here and you have your capacity here, you're not making enough money. Yeah. If your sales are right here and your capacity is here, this is really profitable because you are selling almost everything you're making. The problem is if your sales come up here, you don't have the capacity. Now you have to hire more people. And so now you've got that gap again. Yes. So by setting a band for your revenue per employee, you start to identify if the revenue per employee falls below this, we have too many people, I need to sell something. Mm-hmm. If the revenue starts getting here, we're going to start bumping it. We're not going to have enough people. So you have 2 choices. If you start hitting that capacity line, if you're in a product business, you're stuck. But if you're in a service, well, maybe not even a product business, even either one. If you're selling everything that you're making and you don't have room to make any more, raise your price.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, some of those customers will go away. You'll make more per sale. And so the whole line moves up.
Exactly. Oh, that is such a good analogy to use that as well to explain it. It makes so much sense, actually.
Yeah. So I watch my revenue per employee number, and about a year ago, I was thinking I would add another person, and then I went, we're just going to raise our price. And at first, you take that hit because people look at your new higher price and they're like, no. And then all of a sudden, you get a whole new group of customers who are like, really? You can do that quality of work? Yes, we can. And yes, we're going to charge that price. Well, but I could have it done cheaper. Yeah, you can. And then you'll hire us to fix it. But please go right ahead.
Oh my gosh, Lorraine, this is amazing. And I think the one thing that is so important that everybody just need to take from this whole podcast, this episode is all about pivoting pivoting your business when things change.
Mhm.
And I need to throw this out there, because if you're starting a business or if you're running a business, the business that you have now might not be in the same line 10 years, 5, 10 years down the line from what you're doing now. You might have completely changed direction, and you doing a service now, but 5 years from now, you could be doing a completely different service, and your business has evolved into that. And that's why it's so important to understand, number one, do your research upfront, know the trends. And as your business is evolving, hire the right people, so that whatever you're doing, everything is pivoting with the changing market. And I think this is one of those things where I kind of headbutt a little bit with new entrepreneurs, because I do coach a lot of students who are just starting out the entrepreneurial business, and they're kind of thinking, I need to find my purpose. I need to find my passion. What is it that I'm going to do right now that is going to help me, in the future? But what I'm saying is whatever you decide to start with now in your business, it is not going to be your forever business. No. It is going to be constantly evolving and changing. 10 years from now, you could be doing something completely different. You could be in a completely different industry. But I think that the point is just to make a start, really, and just to see where that leads you.
Well, okay, so I'm going to tell you again and add on to that, because I think you're absolutely right that the being open to the change, but also learning along the way. Okay, absolutely. So my undergraduate degree is in elementary education. I was going to be a teacher. My goodness. I've worked in retail. I've worked in oil and gas supply. I went back to school. I've worked in the heating and air conditioning business. I've worked in insurance. And then I started my own business. And as I was starting, one of the things that I kind of went back to was my teaching skills, because I could do stand-up training. So I was doing live seminars as a way of bringing customers in. So going back to that original skill set, I developed an agency because I learned how to do that when I was at the insurance company. Watched the trends. Suddenly, podcasting was a thing. Well, again, my presentation skills worked well in podcasting and in online training. And so what I did was I found the things I was good at, the things I was passionate about, and I have found a way to keep some of those kind of flowing through my life. But I've also looked at things and said, you know what? This whole team building business that I really want to do, it isn't going to work. And so there were moments where I'm like, let's get rid of that and come back to, so you kind of have a little bit of both.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so true. And I think the other part is, like you say, the entity of getting rid really of what's not working for you. We kind of tend to be hoarders in some way. we find it very hard to let go of certain things, especially if you feel you put your heart and your soul into it. And now you're thinking, okay, it's not working, but you try still and push it and push it and push it. It's got to work. It's got to work. I worked so hard to build this up. But you've got to realize and understand that if it's not working for you and you honestly have tried everything possible, then that's the moment where you've got to pivot and move into something else, and also use your skills and your talents, your strengths, and everything else that you feel is comfortable and fits with who you are and what you want to do, and use that to pivot and move forward again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Lorraine, this is amazing. I loved having you here. It is so good. Before we conclude with everything, I know that you've got some you've got an amazing freebie that you're giving away. Why don't you talk to us about this freebie? And for those of you listening, if you want this freebie, because it's going to blow your mind, the link is below in my show notes. But Lorraine, tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so in addition to our core business, we have built an online training community, and it's called the Digital Toolbox, and it's digitaltoolboxin.com. And in the Digital Toolbox, it is free to join. That's the freebie. We have a webinar series every month. It's usually 4 one-hour sessions that you can log in and be a part of the live conversation, or you can download the recordings. We always have a free resource every month, a workbook, a planning sheet. We have tech tips and frequently asked questions. There is an upgraded version. There is a paid membership that includes some other resources, but the real core is You can get started with all of our tools. We do a topic every month. So this month is social media. Next month, we're going to be doing inbound marketing. And then I think in February, it's metrics and SEO. And then we'll circle back to strategy, email marketing. And every month there's something new, and it's free.
Oh my gosh, that is fantastic. I'm definitely going to sign up because I think it is just amazing. Most of the freebies that people have is something digital that you can download, a guide or a PDF or something like that, which is always great to have. But having kind of like a membership like that you get some new stuff every single month is really fantastic. So thank you so much for giving this to the audience. If you're listening right now, as soon as you're done listening to this podcast, go and download this digital toolbox, or just sign up, at least, not download, but sign up for the digital toolbox so you can obviously get some great content from Lorraine every single month that's going to help you maybe even pivot in your business, because you might just even have an aha moment somewhere along the line. Lorraine, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you here with us. Before we go, is there anything else finally that you would just like to add for everybody?
You know, I think at the end of the day, if you're going to go down this path and you are going to pour your heart and your soul into whatever your business is, make sure you love it. Because you don't want to look back at the end of 10 years of doing something going, man, I should have gone fishing. I mean, just love this, because it will take a lot of your time. It will take way more of your time and energy than you ever think. But if you love it, it's worth it.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Lorraine, thank you so much for just being here and sharing everything, all your years of knowledge, just cribbed into a couple of minutes here. No, but honestly, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much again. And I'd love to stay in touch with you. But yeah, no, for all of you listening, go down below to my show notes, go and download, or not download, but sign up for the digital toolbox. And then Lorraine's details will be there as well if you want to get in contact with her directly. Lorraine,
Awesome.
Thank you again. I wish you all of the best. And yeah, we'll speak very soon.
Great. Bye now.